Hello, sewing people of the internet. This video is not something I was intending to make, but I've gotten several comments on a couple of the videos reviewing the Singer Heavy Duty machine that seem to keep bringing up a common theme, or a couple of common themes. So I wanted to take this opportunity to address those comments. Also, I want to respond by video because I fear that if I respond in a typed reply, there's a chance that my reply might come off sounding more defensive or angry or something than I intend. So hopefully hearing it from my own voice will at least help some of that. And hopefully this video will serve as something I can refer others to who will inevitably make the same kinds of comments in the future. Before I address those comments, I want to explain a little bit more about what I'm trying to do and why I'm trying to do it. So I am doing a long-term review of the Singer Heavy Duty machine. There are several Singer Heavy Duty machines of different styles, but there seems to be two platforms of this machine and then a bunch of different variations on those two platforms. The one I have is the 6630M, if I remember, maybe 6360, I don't even remember right now. It's the same machine as the 4452, I think, or the 4432, or maybe those are both the same. It's just kind of the same machine that comes with different options. So a lot of what I learned about this machine will apply to the entire heavy-duty range of machines. Why am I reviewing this machine? Frankly, because so many people have asked me over the years. I don't like to exaggerate, but at least 50,000 people have asked me questions about this. No, I'm kidding, but literally dozens, though, of people have inquired as to whether or not this is a good machine for them to either start with or to just be their sewing machine for doing the kinds of projects that I do on this channel. And the true answer that I have to give them is I don't know, because other than about 5 minutes at a Jo-Ann Fabrics, I have never used this machine. So my goal in this long-running series of videos is to determine not only what this machine isn't good for, but also what it is good for, if it's good for anything. And so far, I think it is good for some stuff. I'd like to further explain how this series is intended to work, because some people seem to be confused. I'm starting easy and progressively working towards harder, more complex, more difficult projects and materials with the machine. I could have just put a 1/4-inch sheet of plywood under the foot, broken a needle and said this machine sucks and called it a day. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Someone commented on a recent video that the materials I used should not have been a challenge for any home machine, and the implication being I should have used something more difficult. Well, you're correct, it should not have been a challenge, and if it were a challenge, that would be instructive. So I want to start with things that the machine should be able to sew well, and move up to things that either it will and it'll surprise me, or it won't and will reveal its weaknesses. So that brings me to one of the themes of several comments that I've gotten, which is that by comparing this machine to the Singer 503A, as I did in probably the previous video to this one, that was a poor choice because that 503A either to some people is not a superior machine, other people think it's a fantastic machine, or mine isn't in particularly good shape because it was put out by the road to be thrown away. There's probably a reason for that. Incidentally, someone commented in the video that the machine needed oiling. I thoroughly oiled that machine when I saved it from the roadside. That was a few months ago, but there's no reason why it should need to be re-oiled now. Someone also mentioned that the foot pedal might be out of adjustment. That might be true. I actually don't know much about that, and I'll look into that because I would like for the machine to perform better than it did. But in the same way as I didn't start with a 1/4-inch sheet of plywood to do a sewing test on this machine, I didn't want to pit it against the very best sewing machine I own from the beginning. I think that comparing this to the 503A, again, if the 503A wiped the floor with this machine, that would be a pretty good indication that pretty much any other machine I have would too. On the other hand, I thought this machine performed better than the 503A in that particular example, so maybe it will perform better against some of my other and arguably better machines, and the only way for us to find that out is to try. On the subject of my vintage machine, several people have said, hey, can you compare this machine against, I don't know, a Janome or, I don't know, any number of machines. 1591 has come up a couple times. I can only compare this machine with the machines that I currently own or acquire between now and when I finally call this series done, whenever that is. At the moment, I don't own a 1591 that works. I have a Treadle Model 15 that barely works, or not even try to compare these two. And I have a 1591 that I've never sewn with because it doesn't work. I have something like 5 or 6 201s. One of them is definitely working now. 2 of them might. And the best of them all, it's off screen over here, is my 1200. Currently has a problem with the electrical connection. I may be able to swap something over from another machine, but right now it's not working. So I need to get it working to do a comparison against this machine. Every machine I own is old and acquired inexpensively and is in sufficiently good condition and working condition for me to use and be happy with, but not necessarily optimal. But that's, again, part of my thinking on this is, and this kind of goes back to the 503A. Somebody said that, if the 503A was, completely gone through and made perfect, it would be a much better performer. Maybe, but I'm speaking to the person who buys one at a thrift store for $50 and plugs it in and starts using it. And for most of us, if we plug it in and it's working, then, that's bad. It's working. We may not know that it's capable of doing better. And so I'm using that baseline as a comparison to this. So there's 2 specific comments that I want to address that talk about some of those issues and a couple of others. I'm not going to name the commenters by name in case for some reason they didn't want me to. You can find the comments if you want. So I'm just going to read the whole comment. 2 layers of 400 denier cloth plus a light duty zipper, that's not a heavy duty task. This is a comment I referred to earlier. Let's see something that a standard household machine would have trouble with, like sewing shoulder straps onto a backpack with a webbing panel at the junction to prevent the straps from tearing the back panel when the pack is used. Or sewing a zipper into a cover for a chair cushion made of extra heavy outdoor upholstery fabric and 5/16 piping in the seams. Or sewing straps into a beach tote with a squared bottom, triangle fold, and a second wear layer added to the bottom. Please show the comparison against a Singer 1591. Then we'll know how helpful a Sailrite or a Consew 206 would be for those types of heavier duty home tasks. So I agree with everything that you've said here, dear commenter. And if you'll give me a chance, that's where I'm going with this. So I assume that most people, or many people maybe, didn't watch the introduction video that I did into this series. But that's the plan, is to see where this thing starts to fail. And I'm not going to do that all in one video. Another way I could have done this is buy this machine and spend a year evaluating it and testing it and trying all these different things and then making the video then. But I just don't have the time to do that. I need to be able to produce some content in the meantime, and so this is the way I'm doing it. So I agree, except I can't do a 1591 unless I happen upon a working 1591 that I can't say no to between now and then. There are something like doing the upholstery cushion and 5/16 piping, probably not going to happen. I wouldn't try that with any of my vintage domestics either. But anyway, so I guess my response to that comment is, give me a minute, I'm getting there. And then the second comment I wanted to talk about, basically a nice comment. I enjoy this series as I enjoy all your content, but I fear this series may make another series about confirmation bias also useful. I'll come back to that. I'm not sure comparing a free vintage machine and a new Singer heavy duty is an appropriate comparison. Adjusted for inflation, and if new, what would that 503 have cost? Probably a couple $1,000. The fact that it was free or that it was old doesn't make it better at sewing. Just a better value proposition for you in that case. That's the point. If you were gifted the Singer Heavy Duty instead of having bought it, would you also call it free and subsequently inflate its performance value, or would you say it costs X on Amazon? Well, I don't know how long you've been with the channel. I'm kind of interrupting you here, but I was given a Sailrite Ultra Feed and evaluated it on the channel. I've used it for a long time, and I've never considered it free in terms of how it values. My questions on value is what you have to pay for an equivalent item. So the Sailrite that was given to me for free is a $750 machine back at that time. I don't know what it costs now. This is a $230 machine if you buy it brand new. The Singer 503A, mine was free, but as I said, I would expect to pay $50 to $100 for one, because that's what they cost today. They don't make that machine now. If they did, yeah, it would be horrifically expensive, but that's not the point. But let's see. The fact that the vintage machine is old also does not necessarily speak to its wear state. It could be new old stock, barely used or thoroughly trashed, or used but then expertly retuned by you. All good points, which is why Bobbin, come here, buddy. That's why I pointed out that that particular machine is one that was put out to be thrown away. Comparing truly like with like, or at least those indices that you can determine are similar, would make for a stronger comparison. I can't imagine comparing a cast iron diesel engine from the 40s and a current day entry-level import car engine and suggesting the new one is cheap because of plastic and electronics and the old one is robust and easy to self-maintain. They just aren't comparable. Anyway, keep it up. I'm enjoying it regardless. Okay, thank you, and I'm glad you are, and I hope you, commenter, are understanding that this is a friendly exchange of ideas. I disagree with a lot of what you said, but I disagree with you in a friendly way. So you say that you can't imagine comparing a cast iron diesel engine from the 40s and a current day entry-level import car. Why not? You absolutely can compare those two things. If you need a farm truck to haul your tractor around, you probably want that 1940s diesel, especially if parts availability is an issue and you don't have facilities to have computers to, tune it or make, or scan it for codes or whatever. Then that's a better choice for you. And it is more robust, for sure. I'll die on that hill, but 1940s diesel engine is probably more robust than a current engine, but diesel or gas or whatever. Doesn't mean that that's a better choice. And again, that's the whole point of this, is I think that vintage domestic sewing machines are better. They're built better, they're more robust, they're just better. But they may not be better for you, whoever you are out there. Maybe this is the better machine, just like maybe for most people a 1940s diesel truck is not the better choice for their daily commute back and forth to work, whereas something modern might be. This may be a more reliable, easier to use, more attainable way to get into or continue sewing, but I don't know unless I try. I want to point out something you said about confirmation bias. Kind of struck a nerve with that in a way. That's something that's very important to me. So if you're not familiar, confirmation bias is the phenomenon where we tend to discard evidence that runs counter to our preferred hypothesis and only recall or consider evidence that supports our preferred hypothesis. I've made it extraordinarily clear for 10 years now that I prefer and recommend I'm pointing at this FOF, I don't know if you can see it, vintage domestic machines, generally pre-1970, as a machine to start out with or to make part of your arsenal for sewing useful utility items. That's been my position all along. If I were being victimized by confirmation bias, then I would be saying that this machine was performing poorly even though it wasn't, that the 503A did better even though it didn't. Like, the result of that first experiment, if you will, is the opposite of what I wanted it to be. I want this machine to fail. I was very explicit about that in an earlier video. My bias is against this machine. So I don't know if you don't know what confirmation bias is or where the confusion is, but the results of the experiment I ran didn't go the way I wanted it to, and I reported the results to you as they happened. I explicitly stated at the beginning of this series my prediction, which is what you're supposed to do when you do a study or run an experiment. You're supposed to say what you expect the outcome to be, and then you do the experiment, and if the outcome is not what you expected, that's called science. You're learning something. I expect this machine to perform okay, but not be something I would consider heavy duty. So far, it's exceeded my expectations. I don't know where you're getting confirmation bias from. I gotta start over. What are you doing? Just a minute. The other thing in that comment that has also come up in some other comments is the idea that it's not a valid or fair comparison to compare what was a premium sewing machine in its day that is now a nearly valueless antique or thrift store item to this pretty entry-level sewing machine now. And I just wholeheartedly disagree with that idea. To me, if you are someone who is either starting out in the sewing hobby or is finding that the really inexpensive or, you know, not heavy duty sewing machine that maybe you started with isn't keeping up with the materials or the items that you want to sew, then you have two logical next options, unless you're ready to step up to something like a Sailrite Ultrafeed or an industrial walking foot sewing machine. And that's either to buy a vintage machine, whatever one you can get, or to buy one of these, or some other similar machine. I know Brother makes one called the Tough and Strong that I know nothing about. But like I said, many people gravitate towards this machine. Why? Because it says heavy duty on it. That's why, and that's the thing we're talking about here. So is it fair to test the two most likely candidates for most people to see which one is better? Yeah, it's fair. Yes, these vintage machines were the cream of the crop back in their day, but they're also 50 and 60 years old now. And again, if this machine works better, if it turns out I've been wrong for years and this is actually the best option, that's important. You still may want to get one of these because you like them, or it's still cheaper, or you like to tinker with things or whatever. Like, there's no real wrong answer if they both work, as long as they both work. Okay, so all that said, next up I'm going to be testing this machine against my Pfaff 260, my Singer 237, one of my Singer 201s, whichever one I can get working well, my wife's Brother CX155 LA, I think it is, and possibly any other machines that I can get my hands on as this process continues. Just for laughs, at the end of this series, I'll probably do a comparison between the Singer Heavy Duty and the Sailrite LSZ1. If nothing else, just to illustrate why you're eventually going to want to move to something like that. Anyway, I hope that clears up some of the seeming misunderstandings. I hope that you're finding this series of videos valuable, even if you're not interested in this machine. If you're an avid sewist and you know people who ask questions about sewing or want to get into it, eventually somebody's going to say, hey, I saw this machine, should I get one? So, you know, maybe it'll help you to be well informed about it too. If you're finding value in this series and you want to do something to help me out, it's summertime, sun's out, guns out. You can always get a Locked and Loaded tank top or some of the other merchandise you'll see in the store below. There's a thanks button if you want to give me a buck or something. You don't have to do that, but if you're moved to, by all means do. If you're one of the people whose comment I am responding to here, again, I tend to have kind of a gruff, dry personality, but behind this beard, I promise you I'm smiling and engaging in a conversation with you. This is definitely intended to be a friendly debate, even if I think you're wrong and even if you think I'm wrong. That's totally cool. Anyway, I'll see you in the upcoming videos. I'm going to be shooting some here from the house. I normally don't apologize for the clutter, but we just had our house painted, so everything is in the room that I sew in, so I got to clear some stuff out before I can really get going. But coming soon, more comparisons for some other vintage domestic machines. I'm interested to see how it goes. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.